The irony was a cruel joke. He owned a conglomerate that fed millions, yet he himself was starving. The hunger was a constant, gnawing presence, a phantom limb of desire that mocked his every waking moment. It wasn't just physical, it was a deeper, spiritual hunger, a yearning for the normalcy that had been stolen from him. His days were a monotonous cycle of attempted meals, agonizing reactions, and the crushing despair that followed. Sleep offered little respite. Haunted by dreams of feasts he could never taste, Clara's face drained of color as she saw the image. Her hand trembled as she picked it up, her gaze fixed on the baby in her arms. The carefully constructed facade crumbled, revealing a flicker of panic. "Where did you get this? This is impossible." His office, once a hub of frenetic energy, now felt like a mausoleum. Documents piled untouched, calls went unanswered, and the empire he had built with such fierce dedication began to feel distant, a world he was slowly fading from. His assistants, carefully selected for their efficiency and discretion, moved around him with hushed reverence, their worried glances a constant reminder of his decline. "Nothing is impossible when the truth is involved," Alexander countered, leaning forward, his voice a low, dangerous whisper. "I know about Lily. I know about her age. And I know about the uncanny resemblance. Tell me, Clara, tell me everything." Alexander was dying, slowly and agonizingly, not from a terminal illness, but from the inability to sustain himself. The man who had everything was being undone by the most fundamental human need. He stared out at the city lights, a glittering expanse that seemed to mock his isolation. The despair was a cold, creeping tide, threatening to engulf him entirely. He had faced down corporate raiders, navigated treacherous economic downturns, and rebuilt his company from the brink of collapse. But this invisible enemy, this silent starvation, was proving to be his ultimate undoing. His life, once a vibrant symphony of power and purpose, was now a discordant whisper, fading into an unbearable silence. The tip had come from an unlikely source, a former nurse who had briefly worked on Alexander's case, a kind woman who had seen his suffering and, in a moment of desperate empathy, recalled a peculiar local legend. "They say there's a little girl in the old quarter," she'd whispered, her voice laced with a mix of superstition and genuine concern, "who can cook anything, and it never causes trouble. My grandmother swore by her mother's cooking for her own ailments." Alexander, a man of science and logic, had scoffed. Yet, as days turned into weeks and his condition worsened, the absurd notion began to gnaw at him. What did he have left to lose? Cornered, Clara's initial defiance gave way to a desperate attempt at damage control. She began to weave a tangled tale, blaming circumstances, fate, and even Alexander's own demanding career for her actions. She claimed she had been overwhelmed, afraid, and had made a terrible mistake. She admitted to giving the baby away, but insisted it was for the child's own good, for a better life. Her words were a torrent of half-truths and evasions, designed to minimize her culpability. He arrived in the old quarter in a nondescript sedan, a stark contrast to his usual armored limousine. The vibrant chaos of the district was a sensory assault after the sterile quiet of his penthouse. Narrow alleys teemed with life, the air thick with the scent of spices, exhaust fumes, and damp earth. Children played in the streets, their laughter echoing off crumbling facades. It was a world away from the polished towers of Viridian City, a world Alexander had long forgotten, or perhaps never truly known. But Alexander was no fool. He listened, his mind dissecting every lie, every omission. He pressed her, relentlessly, about the details of the adoption, the family, the circumstances. Clara grew increasingly agitated, her carefully constructed composure fraying at the edges. She mentioned a friend who had helped her, someone who had arranged everything. The name, when it finally slipped from her lips, sent a shockwave through Alexander Victoria Vance. Following the nurse's vague directions, he navigated the labyrinthine streets until he found it a small, ramshackle food stall, tucked away between a noisy tailor shop and a perpetually overflowing dumpster. A hand-painted sign, faded and peeling, simply read, "Lily's Kitchen." Behind a worn wooden counter, a girl no older than 10 or 11, with bright, intelligent eyes and a perpetually flour-dusted apron, meticulously stirred a large pot. her movements surprisingly deft and confident for her age. The revelation was a gut punch. Victoria, his trusted assistant, involved in this elaborate deception. The pieces began to click into place with chilling clarity. The whispers, the subtle undermining, the constant presence of Marcus. It all pointed to a far more intricate and malicious conspiracy than he had initially imagined. Skepticism warred with a desperate, fragile hope within Alexander. He watched her for a moment, observing the ease with which she handled the ingredients. The gentle way she ladled steaming broth into chipped bowls for the few customers who lingered. There was an earnestness about her, a quiet dignity that belied her youth and the humble surroundings. Alexander left the cafe, leaving Clara trembling and distraught. He had not received the full truth, but he had received enough. The confrontation had confirmed his deepest fears and ignited a fierce, righteous anger within him. He now knew, with terrifying certainty, that his daughter had been stolen from him, and that the betrayal extended far beyond Clara. He had walked into a web of deceit, and he was determined to unravel every single thread, no matter how painful the journey. The path to justice had just become intensely personal. The days that followed Alexander's confrontation with Clara were a blur of intense anticipation. He had given Elias Vance a new, more urgent directive to verify Clara's claims about Victoria's involvement and, most critically, to expedite the DNA test results. Alexander found himself pacing the opulent halls of his mansion, the silence now feeling less like peace and more like a suffocating void, filled only with the echoes of his own racing thoughts. Every glance at Lily, every shared meal, was tinged with a desperate hope and a profound fear. He approached the stall, his presence, even in casual clothes, drawing a few curious glances. Lily looked up, her gaze steady and unafraid. "What can I get for you, sir?" she asked, her voice soft but clear. Finally, the call came. It was Elias Vance, his voice grave. "Mr. Thorne, I have the results, and a full report on Victoria Vance's involvement." Alexander hesitated, the words catching in his throat. He felt foolish. A dying CEO seeking a miracle from a child. I hear you make good soup," he managed, his voice raspy from disuse. Alexander's heart hammered against his ribs. He instructed Vance to come to the mansion immediately. He dismissed all staff, ensuring absolute privacy. When Vance arrived, he carried a thick file and a sealed envelope. Lily offered a small, shy smile. "My grandmother taught me. It's just simple vegetable soup today, with a little chicken." "Let's start with the DNA," Alexander commanded, his voice tight with barely suppressed emotion. He took the sealed envelope, his hands trembling slightly as he tore it open. He unfolded the document, his eyes scanning the technical jargon until they landed on the conclusive statement: probability of paternity 99.99%. Simple. Alexander's doctors had warned him against anything simple. His diet was a complex, meticulously controlled regimen of bland, processed nutrients. Yet the aroma wafting from the pot was intoxicating, a warmth that seemed to promise comfort rather than pain. The words hit him with the force of a physical blow. Lily, his daughter. The world tilted on its axis. A maelstrom of emotions erupted within him, profound shock, a searing wave of anger at the years stolen, an overwhelming surge of paternal love he hadn't known he possessed, and a crushing regret for every moment he hadn't known her. He sank into the nearest armchair, the paper fluttering from his grasp. "I'll have a bowl," he said, his decision made in a sudden surge of recklessness. "My God," he whispered, the words barely audible. She's my daughter." Lily served him a generous portion, the steam curling invitingly. Alexander took the bowl, his hands trembling slightly. He lifted the spoon, the broth a rich, golden hue, filled with chunks of tender vegetables and shredded chicken. He took a cautious sip, bracing himself for the familiar burning. The tightening in his chest, the inevitable nausea. Vance watched him, his expression somber. "The tests are conclusive, Mr. Thorne. Lily is indeed your biological child." But nothing happened. After a moment, Alexander composed himself, though his eyes remained wide with a mixture of awe and pain. "And Victoria?" he asked, his voice now laced with a dangerous edge. He took another sip. And another. The warmth spread through him, not as a threat, but as a gentle embrace. The flavors were subtle, wholesome, and utterly delicious. He could taste the sweetness of carrots, the earthiness of potatoes, the comforting richness of the broth. There was no pain, no discomfort, no hint of an allergic reaction. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, he was truly savoring food. Vance opened the file, laying out a meticulously compiled dossier. Victoria Vance, your executive assistant, was Clara's closest confidant and the mastermind behind the entire deception. She arranged the fake death certificate, fabricated the adoption papers, and ensured Lily was placed with an unsuspecting family in the Old Quarter, far from your reach. Her motive was purely financial. She and Marcus Thorne stood to gain significantly if you remained unmarried and without an heir. With Clara out of the picture and a dead child, they believed they could manipulate your emotional state and eventually gain control over Thorne Industries. Tears welled in his eyes, hot and unexpected. It wasn't just the relief from hunger, it was the relief from despair. It was the sudden, overwhelming realization that he might not be dying after all. He looked at Lily, who watched him with a quiet curiosity, her expression unreadable. In that moment, surrounded by the bustling chaos of the Old Quarter, Alexander Thorne, the man who had lost everything, found a fragile, yet undeniable, glimmer of hope. The last spoonful of soup vanished, leaving Alexander with a profound sense of peace he hadn't felt in months, perhaps years. His body, usually a battleground of pain and rejection, felt calm, nourished. He looked up at Lily, who was now meticulously wiping down her small counter with a damp cloth. Her movements efficient and practiced. The revelation of Victoria's treachery, combined with Marcus's involvement, ignited a cold fury in Alexander. The woman he had trusted implicitly, the brother he had always tried to protect, had conspired to steal his child, to erase a part of his life, all for greed. The pieces of the puzzle now fit perfectly, forming a horrifying picture of betrayal, the subtle whispers, the veiled criticisms, Victoria's constant presence. It was all part of their elaborate scheme. That was incredible, Alexander said, his voice stronger than he expected. He reached for his wallet, pulling out a stack of high-denomination bills. How much do I owe you? They faked her death, Alexander repeated, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. They made me believe my child was dead. For money, for power. His hands clenched into fists, his knuckles white. The years of grief, the despair, the near-death experience from his mysterious illness. It all coalesced into a burning desire for justice. Lily glanced at the money, her eyes widening slightly, but she quickly composed herself. It's just 50,000 dong, sir, she replied, her voice soft. Vance continued, detailing how Victoria had leveraged her position within Thorne Industries to access sensitive information, manipulate records, and even subtly influence Alexander's medical care during his illness, ensuring he remained isolated and vulnerable. It was a chilling testament to the depth of their depravity. Alexander stared at the small amount, then back at the stack in his hand. It was a pittance. He pushed the entire stack across the counter. Keep the change. And I have another proposition for you. Alexander stood up, his gaze fixed on the window, seeing not the city lights, but the faces of those who had wronged him. The shock was still raw, but beneath it, a steely resolve began to form. He had been a victim of a cruel, calculated deception, but no longer. He had found his daughter, and with that discovery came an unshakable purpose. Lily looked at him, her brow furrowed with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. A proposition, sir. He turned to Vance, his eyes blazing with a fierce determination. Elias, this is just the beginning. I want every single detail, every transaction, every communication, every lie. I want to build an airtight case. They will pay for what they've done. Every single one of them. Yes! Alexander took a deep breath. This was unconventional, even for him. But desperation had a way of overriding decorum. My condition. It's severe. I haven't been able to eat anything without severe reactions for months. Your soup, it's the first thing that hasn't made me ill. I need you to cook for me. The revelation of Lily's true identity was a devastating blow. Yet it also brought an overwhelming sense of connection and paternal love that Alexander had never known. He looked at the DNA report again, then at a framed photograph of Lily on his desk, her bright, innocent eyes looking back at him. His daughter! The word resonated deep within his soul. The journey to uncover the truth had been agonizing, but the discovery of Lily had transformed his world, turning despair into a powerful, unwavering resolve for justice. The DNA results had been the undeniable proof, the final, shattering piece of a puzzle Alexander hadn't even known he was solving. With Lily confirmed as his daughter, his focus sharpened, shifting from the emotional devastation of the revelation to the cold, calculated pursuit of justice. Elias Vance, now fully aware of the stakes, worked tirelessly, unearthing every detail of the conspiracy. Lily's eyes widened further, her gaze flicking from him to the bustling street, as if seeking an escape route. "Cook for you, sir. I just have this small stall. I cook simple food." Vance's investigation revealed a meticulously crafted web of deceit, spun over a decade ago. The architect of it all was Victoria Vance, Alexander's seemingly loyal executive assistant. Her motive, as Alexander had suspected, was pure, unadulterated greed. Victoria had long harbored a secret ambition to control Thorne Industries from behind the scenes. She knew that if Alexander remained unmarried and without a direct heir, his vast fortune and company leadership would eventually fall to his closest living relative, his brother. "Marcus." "Exactly," Alexander countered, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "Simple, wholesome, whatever it is. Your food is different. I want you to come to my home. I'll provide everything you need, ingredients, a proper kitchen, anything. You'll cook for me daily, and I will pay you handsomely, more than you could ever earn here in a year." Marcus Thorne, a man perpetually in Alexander's shadow, was easily swayed by Victoria's cunning. He craved the power and recognition that Alexander commanded, and he resented his brother's effortless success. Victoria had approached him shortly after Clara's pregnancy became known, painting a picture of a future where they, together, could control the Thorne Empire. Their plan was simple, yet horrifyingly effective. Eliminate Alexander's direct lineage, ensure he remained emotionally vulnerable, and then slowly, systematically, gain control. The offer hung in the air, a bridge between two vastly different worlds. Lily was silent for a long moment, her gaze dropping to her worn apron. Alexander could see the wheels turning in her mind, the calculation of a child burdened with adult responsibilities. He knew, instinctively, that she wasn't just working for herself. Clara, initially a pawn in their game, had become a willing participant. Her love for Alexander had been genuine, but her ambition and a deep-seated insecurity had made her susceptible to Victoria's manipulation. Victoria had convinced Clara that Alexander would never truly accept a child born out of wedlock, especially one that might complicate his corporate image. She had exploited Clara's fears, twisting them into a narrative of self-preservation. The fake death certificate for the infant, the fabricated adoption papers, the careful placement of Lily with an unsuspecting family in the Old Quarter, all were orchestrated by Victoria, with Marcus providing financial backing and leveraging his limited influence within the family network. "My grandmother," Lily finally said, her voice barely a whisper. "She's very ill. I take care of her." The details were chilling. Vance uncovered bank transfers from Marcus's offshore accounts to a shell company controlled by Victoria, funds used to pay off the corrupt officials who forged documents, and the intermediaries who facilitated Lily's placement. He found encrypted communications between Victoria, Marcus, and Clara, detailing their plans, their anxieties, and their contempt for Alexander. There were even subtle records of Victoria diverting Alexander's attention during his illness, ensuring he remained isolated and unable to question the true cause of his debilitating condition. His mysterious allergy, it turned out, was not a natural affliction, but a carefully induced sensitivity, a slow poisoning designed to weaken him and make him more pliable. The cure Lily provided was simply a return to wholesome, untainted food. Alexander seized on the opening. "She can come too. My home is large. She'll have the best medical care, anything she needs. You both will be safe, comfortable. You won't have to worry about anything, ever again." The full extent of their depravity was laid bare. They had not merely hidden Alexander's child, they had systematically dismantled his life, preying on his grief and vulnerability. The betrayal cut deeper than any corporate espionage or hostile takeover could have. It was a personal, intimate violation of trust, a theft of his future and his family. Lily looked up, her intelligent eyes searching his. She saw not a predatory CEO, but a man on the brink, a man who, despite his immense power, was utterly vulnerable. She also saw an opportunity, A chance to provide her ailing grandmother with the care she so desperately needed, far beyond what her meager earnings could ever afford. The old quarter was a tough place, and life was a constant struggle. This was a lifeline. Alexander reviewed Vance's comprehensive report, his face a mask of cold fury. Each piece of evidence, each damning detail, fueled his resolve. He saw the cold, calculating ambition in Victoria's meticulous planning, the weak, desperate greed in Marcus's complicity, and the tragic, misguided fear that had driven Clara. He had built his empire on integrity and strategic brilliance, and these three had sought to tear it down with deceit and cruelty. You promise my grandmother will be safe?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. He knew he couldn't confront them yet. He needed to be absolutely certain, to gather every shred of irrefutable evidence that would stand up in court and in the court of public opinion. He wanted their downfall to be absolute, their reputations shattered beyond repair. "I promise," Alexander said, his voice firm, his gaze unwavering. "On my word." The next few days were spent in a whirlwind of legal consultations, all conducted under the strictest secrecy. Alexander's legal team, handpicked for their discretion and ruthless efficiency, began to prepare the case. They would not only pursue criminal charges for fraud and conspiracy, but also civil suits that would strip Victoria and Marcus of every asset they possessed. Clara, though a participant, would be offered a chance to cooperate. Though Alexander felt little mercy for her, a long pause stretched between them, punctuated by the distant rumble of traffic and the chatter of the market. Finally, Lily nodded, a slow, hesitant movement. "Okay, sir," she said, her voice small but resolute. "I will come." The full picture of the betrayal was now terrifyingly clear. Alexander had been living a lie, manipulated by those closest to him, all while his own daughter grew up in poverty, unaware of her true lineage. The injustice burned within him, transforming his grief into a powerful, unwavering resolve. He was no longer just a CEO fighting for his company. He was a father fighting for his child, and for the justice that had been denied to them both for far too long. The stage was set for a dramatic confrontation, one that would expose the dark heart of his inner circle and reclaim what was rightfully his. The truth, once a dimly lit path, now blazed with a searing intensity, illuminating the dark corners of Alexander's past. He had spent days meticulously reviewing Elias Vance's report, each page a fresh wound, a testament to the depth of the betrayal. The anger was a constant simmering fire within him, but beneath it, a profound sorrow for the lost years, the stolen memories, and the childhood Lily had been denied. He felt an overwhelming urge to protect her, to shield her from the harsh realities of the world, especially the cruel machinations of those who should have cared for her. Alexander felt a wave of relief so profound it almost buckled his knees. He had found not just a cure for his hunger, but a fragile, unexpected connection that promised to change everything. He extended his hand, and Lily, after a moment's hesitation, took it. Her small hand was surprisingly firm, her grip steady. It was an unlikely arrangement. A powerful CEO and a child cook, stepping together into an unknown future. The transition from the bustling, vibrant chaos of the old quarter to the hushed, opulent grandeur of Alexander Thorne's mansion was like stepping into another dimension for Lily. The Thorne estate, nestled on a sprawling hill overlooking Viridian City, was a fortress of glass and steel, surrounded by manicured gardens and guarded by an invisible army of security systems. Every surface gleamed, every corner was meticulously clean, and the air, unlike the rich aromas of her food stall, was scentless, almost clinical. The most daunting task remained telling Lily. How could he explain such a monstrous deception to a child who had known only a life of quiet struggle and then sudden, unexpected comfort? How could he tell her that the woman she knew as her grandmother was not her biological kin, and that her true father, a man of immense power, had been unknowingly robbed of her existence? Lily and her grandmother, Mrs. N, arrived in a sleek, black car, its tinted windows obscuring the world they were leaving behind. Mrs. N, frail and weak, was immediately whisked away by a team of private nurses, her worried glances at Lily replaced by a look of bewildered awe as she was settled into a luxurious, sun-drenched suite. Lily, left alone in the vast, echoing foyer, felt a pang of loneliness amidst the overwhelming luxury. Alexander chose a quiet evening, After Lily had finished preparing dinner and her grandmother was asleep, he led her to a comfortable sitting room, away from the prying eyes and ears of the staff. Lily, sensing the gravity of his demeanor, sat quietly, her small hands clasped in her lap, her bright eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Alexander, true to his word, had provided everything. Her new kitchen was a chef's dream, gleaming stainless steel, state-of-the-art appliances, and an endless pantry stocked with the freshest, most exotic ingredients imaginable. It was a far cry from her small, charcoal-fired stove and limited supplies. Yet, despite the extravagance, Lily found comfort in the familiar rhythm of cooking. "Lily," Alexander began, his voice surprisingly gentle, "I have something very important to tell you. Something that will change everything." He paused, taking a deep breath. "Do you remember the old photograph you found? The one with me, and the woman, and the baby?" Her days quickly fell into a routine. She would wake early, select ingredients, and begin preparing Alexander's meals. At first, she cooked the simple, wholesome dishes she knew: vegetable soups, steamed fish with rice, light broths. Alexander devoured each meal with a hunger that was both physical and emotional, a stark contrast to his previous aversion to food. With each passing day, his color returned, his eyes regained their sharp focus, and the gauntness began to recede. He started to look like the formidable CEO he once was, though a quiet vulnerability now softened his gaze. Lily nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on his face. As his health improved, Alexander spent more time observing Lily. He would often sit at the kitchen island, nursing a cup of herbal tea, watching her deft hands chop vegetables, knead dough, or stir a simmering pot. He was struck by her quiet competence, her unwavering focus, and the almost meditative quality of her movements. She rarely spoke unless spoken to, but her presence was a calming balm in his otherwise turbulent life. "That woman," Alexander continued, his voice thick with emotion, "her name was Clara. She was my fiancée a long time ago. And the baby in that photograph, Lily, that baby was you." Lily, in turn, began to grow accustomed to Alexander's quiet presence. She learned to anticipate his preferences, the subtle shifts in his mood, and the unspoken gratitude in his eyes. She saw past the powerful CEO to the man who had been starving, both literally and figuratively. She saw his relief, his growing strength, and the fragile hope that had begun to bloom in his once despairing eyes. Lily's eyes widened, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. "Me, but," my grandmother said, a tentative, yet profound bond began to form between them. It wasn't the bond of employer and employee, nor simply that of patient and healer. It was something deeper, built on trust and a shared, unspoken understanding. Alexander found solace in her simple, nourishing food and her quiet, steady presence. Lily, for her part, found a sense of purpose and security she had never known, and a strange, burgeoning affection for the powerful man who had plucked her from poverty and given her grandmother a chance at life. "I know what your grandmother told you," Alexander interrupted softly, "and she loved you very much, and she raised you with kindness. But she was part of a deception, a terrible lie." He then explained, as simply and gently as he could, the story of Clara, the faked death certificate, the fabricated adoption, and the conspiracy involving Victoria and Marcus. He omitted the more brutal details of his illness, focusing on the core betrayal. One evening, after a particularly satisfying meal, Alexander looked at Lily, a genuine smile gracing his lips, a sight rarely seen by anyone in his inner circle. "Lily," he said, his voice soft, "you've given me my life back." Lily listened, her face a canvas of shifting emotions. Initial confusion gave way to disbelief, then a profound sadness. Her lower lip trembled, and tears welled in her eyes. The world she had known, the narrative of her life, was crumbling around her. The woman she thought was her grandmother, the only family she had ever truly known, was now revealed to be part of a lie. The man sitting before her, the powerful CEO who had saved her and her grandmother, was her father. It was too much to process, a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Lily simply offered a small and shy smile in return, her eyes reflecting a quiet contentment. In the vast, silent mansion, two solitary souls had found an unexpected connection, a fragile bridge built on the simple act of cooking and the profound act of healing. Alexander was not just regaining his health, he was rediscovering the joy of living, thanks to the quiet girl who held the secret to his survival. Alexander's remarkable recovery was undeniable, a stark transformation that baffled his doctors and delighted his closest, most loyal advisors. Yet not everyone shared in his newfound well-being. His inner circle, a carefully curated collection of ambitious executives and long-standing family members, watched Lily's growing influence with a mixture of bewilderment and thinly veiled resentment. "My grandmother, she lied to me," Lily whispered, her voice barely audible, laced with a heartbreaking vulnerability. Chief among them was Victoria Vance, Alexander's sharp, impeccably dressed executive assistant. For years, Victoria had been Alexander's gatekeeper, his shadow, and his most trusted confidant in the corporate world. She prided herself on her indispensable role, her meticulous control over his schedule, his information, and even, to some extent, his personal life. Lily's sudden arrival, her unassuming presence, and her undeniable power over Alexander's health felt like a direct usurpation of her authority. Victoria, a woman who valued order and predictability, saw only chaos and an inexplicable attachment to a mere child. She observed Lily with cold, calculating eyes, her mind already spinning theories of manipulation and ulterior motives. She was manipulated. "Lily," Alexander explained, his heart aching for her. "She was told you were an orphan, abandoned. They made her believe she was doing a good deed by taking you in. She loved you. Lily. That much is clear, but she was a victim of their lies too." He showed her the DNA results, explaining what they meant, the scientific proof of their connection. Then there was Marcus Thorne, Alexander's younger brother. Marcus, perpetually overshadowed by Alexander's brilliance and success, harbored a deep-seated envy that festered beneath a veneer of fraternal affection. He had always seen himself as the rightful heir to a significant portion of Thorne Industries, and Alexander's recent illness had presented a golden opportunity to solidify his position within the company. Lily's presence, and Alexander's rapid return to health, threatened to derail his carefully laid plans. Marcus, a man of impulsive decisions and a penchant for indulgence, viewed Lily not as a savior, but as an obstacle, an irritating fly in the ointment of his ambition. He began to spread subtle, insidious rumors among the staff, questioning Lily's background, her sudden appearance, and the unusual nature of her employment. As the full weight of the truth settled upon her, Lily broke down, silent tears streaming down her face. It was a cry not of anger, but of profound loss and disorientation. Her entire identity, her sense of belonging, had been uprooted. Alexander, seeing her pain, moved closer, pulling her gently into a hug. It was the first time he had ever truly held his daughter. He felt her small body tremble against his, and he held her tighter, a silent promise to protect her, to make up for every lost moment. The mansion staff, a discreet but observant group, also buzzed with whispers. They had witnessed Alexander's decline and now his miraculous recovery, all attributed to the quiet girl who spent her days in the kitchen. Some were genuinely fond of Lily, charmed by her earnestness and the warmth she brought to the sterile environment. Others, however, fueled by Victoria and Marcus's subtle machinations, saw her as an anomaly, an outsider who had inexplicably gained the CEO's favor. They whispered about her humble origins, her lack of formal training, and the sheer audacity of her presence in such an elite household. For Alexander, the emotional fallout was equally intense. The initial fury at Victoria and Marcus was now intertwined with a deep, aching regret. He had been so close, yet so far. He had walked past his own daughter in the old quarter, unaware of their connection. While she struggled to survive, the thought was a torment. But holding her now, feeling her small hand cling to his shirt, a new emotion began to bloom, an overwhelming sense of paternal love, fierce and protective. He vowed, then and there, that no one would ever hurt her again. Victoria, ever the strategist, began to subtly undermine Lily's position. She would accidentally misplace Lily's grocery lists, forget to relay messages from Alexander, or suggest that certain ingredients were unavailable, hoping to disrupt Lily's routine and, by extension, Alexander's meals. She would also drop leading remarks in Alexander's presence, disguised as concern, Are you sure, Mr. Thorne, that it's wise to rely solely on one person for your health? What if something were to happen to Lily? Her words were always delivered with a saccharine smile, laced with a venomous undertone. Lily eventually pulled away, her eyes red-rimmed but resolute. She looked at Alexander, truly looked at him, and for the first time saw not just her benefactor, but her father. The resemblance, now undeniable, was a comfort amidst the chaos. The shock was still raw, but a nascent sense of belonging began to take root. She had a father, a real father. And he was here, holding her, promising to make things right. The storm of emotions raged, but in its eye, a fragile new family was beginning to form. The storm of emotions that had raged within Alexander and Lily slowly began to subside, replaced by a quiet resolve. Lily, though still grappling with the monumental shift in her reality, found solace in Alexander's unwavering presence and the fierce love he now openly showered upon her. For Alexander, the pain of the past was now channeled into a singular, burning purpose: justice. He would not rest until those who had stolen his daughter and manipulated his life faced the full consequences of their actions. Marcus, less subtle than Victoria, would make pointed comments during family dinners that Lily was sometimes present for. Remarkable, isn't it, Alexander? A child with no formal training, yet she holds the key to your well-being. One might almost call it a miracle. Or perhaps a very clever distraction. He would then laugh, a brittle, humorless sound, and watch Alexander's reaction, hoping to plant a seed of doubt. He began by consolidating all the evidence Elias Vance had meticulously gathered: the DNA results, the forged documents, the financial transactions, the encrypted communications. It was an irrefutable mountain of proof. Alexander, a master strategist in the corporate world, approached this personal battle with the same precision and ruthlessness. He assembled his most trusted legal team, a formidable group known for their tenacity and discretion, and laid out the entire, shocking narrative. Alexander, still basking in the glow of his renewed health, initially dismissed these whispers and veiled criticisms. He trusted Lily implicitly. Her food had saved his life. He saw only her innocence and her dedication. Yet, the constant, subtle erosion of trust, the insidious suggestions, began to chip away at the edges of his peace. He noticed the strained smiles of some staff members, the averted gazes, the sudden silences when he entered a room. He was a man accustomed to reading the undercurrents of power and ambition, and he sensed a growing tension, a quiet battle brewing beneath the surface of his seemingly tranquil home. The seeds of suspicion, carefully sown by Victoria and Marcus, were beginning to take root, threatening the fragile sanctuary he had found with Lily. As weeks turned into months, a comfortable rhythm settled into the Thorne mansion. Despite the lingering undercurrents of suspicion from Victoria and Marcus, Lily, now more at ease in her new surroundings, continued to work her quiet magic in the kitchen. Her grandmother, Mrs. Anne, was slowly regaining her strength under the attentive care of Alexander's private medical team, a source of immense relief for Lily. Alexander, fully recovered, had returned to the helm of Thorne Industries with renewed vigor, his mind sharper than ever, his body no longer a prison. The first target was Victoria Vance. Alexander knew her ambition was her Achilles heel. He scheduled a seemingly routine meeting with her, ensuring it was in his private office, away from prying eyes. Victoria, oblivious to the storm brewing, arrived with her usual air of cool efficiency, a faint, condescending smile playing on her lips. Yet, amidst this newfound stability, something subtle began to shift within Alexander. It started innocently enough, with a fleeting sensation, a whisper of familiarity. One morning, as Lily prepared a simple breakfast of rice porridge with thinly sliced ginger and chicken, the aroma wafting from the pot stirred a peculiar feeling in him. It wasn't just the comforting scent of a wholesome meal, it was something deeper, a faint echo from a distant past. He paused, spoon halfway to his mouth, trying to grasp the elusive memory, but it slipped away like smoke. "Victoria," Alexander began, his voice calm, almost unnervingly so, "we need to discuss a matter of extreme importance, a matter concerning my family and your involvement." The instances became more frequent. The way Lily hummed a soft, wordless tune as she kneaded dough, a melody that resonated with a forgotten lullaby, the particular way she chopped vegetables, a precise, almost artistic rhythm that seemed to trigger a faint visual in his mind's eye, a pair of smaller hands, equally deft, working beside him in a sun-drenched kitchen. He would shake his head, dismissing them as mere coincidences, products of his imagination, or perhaps the lingering effects of his illness. Victoria's smile faltered. A flicker of unease crossed her face, quickly masked. My involvement, Mr. Thorne, I assure you. I am always dedicated to your family's well-being and the company's interests. One afternoon, Lily was preparing a dish of braised pork with eggs, a traditional family recipe she had learned from her grandmother. The rich, savory scent filled the kitchen, a scent that Alexander had never encountered before. Yet it struck him with an almost physical force. He was in his study, reviewing complex financial reports, but the aroma pulled him, irresistibly, towards the kitchen. He found Lily meticulously arranging the finished dish on a serving platter, her brow furrowed in concentration. Alexander leaned back in his chair, his gaze piercing. He then, without a word, pushed a folder across the desk. Inside were copies of the DNA results, the fake death certificate, and transcripts of her communications with Clara and Marcus. What is that? He asked, his voice softer than usual. Victoria's face drained of all color. Her composure shattered instantly, replaced by a desperate, animalistic fear. This is impossible. These are fabrications, she stammered, her voice rising in panic. Lily looked up, startled. It's the Ko-Trung, sir, my grandmother's favorite. They are not. Victoria, Alexander said, his voice now a cold steel blade. They are the truth. The truth about how you conspired with my brother to steal my daughter, to fake her death, and to manipulate my life for your own greedy ends. The truth about how you orchestrated my illness, hoping to weaken me and gain control. Alexander approached the counter, drawn by an inexplicable compulsion. He picked up a small piece of pork with a fork, the meat tender and glistening. As he brought it to his lips, a vivid flash exploded in his mind, a woman's laughing face, her eyes bright with affection, holding a similar dish. She was speaking, but her words were muffled, indistinct. The image was fleeting, gone as quickly as it appeared, leaving him with a jolt of disorientation and a strange ache in his chest. He watched her crumble, her carefully constructed facade dissolving into a pathetic display of terror. She pleaded, she begged, she offered excuses, blaming Marcus, blaming Clara, blaming circumstances. But Alexander was unmoved. He had seen enough of her deceit. He put down the fork, his appetite suddenly gone. Lily looked at him, her expression concerned. Is something wrong, sir? Does it not smell good? You have two choices. Victoria, Alexander stated, his voice devoid of emotion. Cooperate fully, provide every detail of Marcus's and Clara's involvement, and you might receive a slightly less severe sentence. Or face the full wrath of Thorne Industries' legal department. I assure you, you will lose everything. Your reputation, your career, your freedom. No, it smells wonderful, Lily. Alexander quickly reassured her, forcing a smile. It just reminded me of something. Nothing important. But it was important. He knew it. The memory, though fragmented, felt significant. Like a missing piece of a puzzle he didn't even know he was trying to solve. Realizing the futility of resistance, Victoria, trembling, began to confess, spilling every detail of the decade-long conspiracy, implicating Marcus and Clara even further. Her confession, recorded and witnessed by Alexander's legal team, became another crucial piece of evidence. He began to pay closer attention. He noticed the way Lily's eyes crinkled at the corners when she smiled, a familiar warmth that tugged at something deep within him. He observed her quiet resilience, her unwavering dedication to her grandmother, and her innate kindness. These weren't just the traits of a good employee. They felt like echoes of a connection he couldn't quite place. Next, Alexander turned his attention to Marcus. The confrontation with his brother was far more painful, tinged with the bitterness of betrayed familial trust. Marcus, arrogant and entitled, initially scoffed at Alexander's accusations, dismissing them as paranoia. But when faced with Victoria's detailed confession and the overwhelming evidence, his bravado evaporated. replaced by a pathetic attempt to shift blame. The vague glimpses became persistent, unsettling. They were like whispers from a dream, just out of reach, yet undeniably present. Alexander, a man who prided himself on his sharp memory and analytical mind, found himself increasingly preoccupied by these elusive fragments. He started spending more time in the less frequented parts of his mansion, hoping to stumble upon something, anything, that might unlock the full picture. The spark of hope that Lily's food had ignited was now transforming into a flicker of curiosity, urging him to delve deeper into the mysteries of his own past, a past he had long believed to be fully accounted for. He had a gnawing feeling that the answers lay closer than he could possibly imagine. The Thorne mansion, despite its vastness, was meticulously maintained by a small army of staff. However, there were certain areas, rarely used by Alexander himself, that remained largely untouched, gathering a thin film of dust and forgotten memories. One such area was a small, antechamber-like study, adjacent to the main library, filled with old, leather-bound books and neglected curios. "You were always so obsessed with power. Alexander," Marcus blurted out, his voice cracking. "I just wanted a piece of what you had," Victoria said. "It was the only way." One particularly quiet afternoon, with Alexander engrossed in a crucial board meeting and resting peacefully, Lily decided to take it upon herself to tidy this forgotten space. She had always been one to find comfort in order, a habit ingrained from years of managing her small, bustling food stall. Armed with a duster and a soft cloth, she began to carefully wipe down shelves and polish the dark wood. "There is no excuse for stealing a child, Marcus," Alexander retorted, his voice low and dangerous. "No excuse for the pain you inflicted. You will answer for this." As she reached a seldom opened cabinet, her fingers brushed against a worn, leather-bound album, tucked away behind a stack of ancient atlases. Curiosity, a rare indulgence for Lily, prompted her to pull it out. The album felt heavy in her hands, its pages stiff with age. She settled into a plush armchair, the dust motes dancing in the slivers of sunlight filtering through the heavy drapes, and gently opened the cover. The legal proceedings moved swiftly. Alexander, leveraging his immense influence and the irrefutable evidence, ensured that no stone was left unturned. The story, when it broke, sent shockwaves through the corporate world and the city's elite. Thorne Industries' CEO's daughter found after decade-long deception, screamed the headlines. The public was captivated by the dramatic tale of betrayal and discovery. Inside, faded photographs chronicled a life she knew nothing about. There were pictures of a younger Alexander, vibrant and carefree, with friends she didn't recognize, at events she couldn't fathom. She flipped through pages filled with formal portraits, candid shots of lavish parties, and breathtaking landscapes from exotic travels. It was a glimpse into a world utterly alien to her. Clara, faced with the overwhelming evidence and Victoria's confession, was offered a plea bargain in exchange for her full cooperation. She provided further details, confirming the conspiracy and solidifying the case against Victoria and Marcus. While Alexander felt no forgiveness, he allowed her a path to avoid the harshest penalties, primarily for Lily's sake, hoping to minimize further public spectacle. Then, she paused. Her breath hitched. On a yellowed page, a single photograph stood out, its edges slightly curled. It showed a younger Alexander, perhaps in his late 20s, his face softer, less burdened by the weight of his empire. He was smiling, a genuine, uninhibited smile she had rarely seen. Beside him stood a woman, her arm linked through his, her eyes sparkling with warmth and affection. She was beautiful, with long, dark hair and a gentle curve to her lips. But it wasn't just her beauty that caught Lily's attention. Victoria and Marcus were arrested, their carefully built lives crumbling around them. The legal battles were fierce, but the evidence was overwhelming. Victoria was charged with fraud, conspiracy, and attempted manipulation of a major corporation. Marcus faced similar charges, compounded by the ethical breach of his family connection. Their assets were frozen, their reputations irrevocably destroyed. The woman held a baby in her arms, swaddled in a delicate white blanket. The baby's face was tiny, barely visible, but something about the way the woman held the infant, the tenderness in her gaze, struck a deep chord within Lily. And then, her eyes widened in shock. The woman. She bore an uncanny, almost unsettling resemblance to Lily herself, not just in the shape of her eyes or the curve of her nose, but in the overall expression. A certain quiet strength that mirrored her own. The public trial was a spectacle, but Alexander ensured Lily was shielded from its harsh glare, keeping her away from the media frenzy. He watched as Victoria and Marcus, once powerful figures, were reduced to broken individuals, their greed and deceit exposed for all to see. The verdicts came swiftly guilty on all counts. They were sentenced to significant prison terms, and their remaining assets were seized. A small measure of restitution for the years of suffering they had caused. A jolt went through Lily, a strange mix of confusion and a nascent sense of recognition. She stared at the photograph, her heart thumping a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Who was this woman? And the baby? Justice had been served. It was a cold, hard victory, but a necessary one. The bitter taste of betrayal lingered, but it was now tempered by the profound relief that the truth was out, and those who had wronged him and Lily would pay the price. The path was now clear for Alexander to focus entirely on rebuilding his life, and more importantly, on forging an unbreakable bond with his long-lost daughter. With justice served and the architects of the decade-long deception behind bars, a profound sense of calm finally settled over Alexander Thorne. The bitter taste of betrayal lingered, a scar on his soul, but it was now overshadowed by the overwhelming joy of having Lily by his side. The public spectacle of the trial had been a necessary evil, but Alexander had shielded Lily from its harsh glare, ensuring her world remained a sanctuary of newfound peace. Just then, the study door opened, and Alexander walked in, a stack of documents in his hand, his mind still on the board meeting. He stopped short when he saw Lily, sitting quietly, holding the old album. His primary focus shifted entirely from corporate battles to the quiet, yet infinitely more rewarding, task of rebuilding his family. He dedicated himself to Lily with an intensity that surprised even himself. He cleared his schedule, delegating responsibilities at Thorne Industries to his most trusted lieutenants, ensuring he had ample time to connect with his daughter. "Lily, what are you doing in here?" he asked, a hint of surprise in his voice. Their days became a tapestry of shared experiences. Alexander, once a man of rigid routines and solitary pursuits, found immense joy in the simple act of being a father. He would sit with Lily as she cooked, not just observing, but learning, asking questions about ingredients and techniques, marveling at her innate talent. He enrolled her in the finest private school, ensuring she received an education that matched her sharp intellect, something she had been denied in her previous life. He hired tutors to help her catch up, and Lily, eager to learn, absorbed knowledge like a sponge. Lily looked up, her face pale, her hand trembling slightly as she held out the album, open to the page with the photograph. "Sir, I found this woman. She looks like me." He took her on trips, not lavish corporate retreats, but quiet excursions to places of natural beauty, where they could simply be themselves, away from the scrutiny of the world. They visited art museums, explored botanical gardens, and spent afternoons reading together in the vast library of the mansion. Alexander discovered a playful side to himself he never knew existed, engaging in light-hearted banter and sharing laughter with Lily, moments that healed old wounds and forged new, precious memories. Alexander's gaze fell upon the photograph. The casual air he carried moments before evaporated, replaced by a sudden, stark stillness. His eyes widened, fixing on the image, the smile on his younger self, the woman's face, the tiny bundle in her arms. It all slammed into him with the force of a physical blow. Lily, in turn, blossomed under his unwavering love and attention. The initial shock and sadness slowly gave way to a burgeoning sense of security and belonging. She found comfort in Alexander's strong, steady presence, in his patient explanations, and in the quiet understanding that passed between them. She learned to trust again, to open her heart to the man who was not just her benefactor, but her true father. The resemblance between them, once a source of unsettling mystery, now became a comforting mirror, a visual confirmation of their unbreakable bond. A wave of memories, no longer fragmented whispers, but a roaring torrent, crashed over him. The sun-drenched kitchen, the scent of a specific dish, the lullaby, the laughter. It all coalesced into a painful, undeniable truth. The woman in the picture was Clara, his fiancée from years ago, a relationship he had buried deep in the recesses of his mind after a devastating loss. And the baby. The baby was supposed to be gone. Mrs. and Lily's adoptive grandmother remained in the mansion, receiving the best medical care Alexander's wealth could provide. Though her health was fragile, she found peace in seeing Lily happy and safe. Alexander, understanding the profound love Mrs. Anne had for Lily, ensured she was comfortable and cared for, recognizing her role in Lily's life. Even if it had been built on a foundation of deceit, Lily often spent time with her, sharing stories and quiet moments, ensuring that the love they shared remained unbroken. Despite the revelations, his hand reached out, trembling, to touch the faded image. His eyes, usually so sharp and analytical, were now clouded with a mixture of shock, grief, and a dawning, terrifying realization. The ache in his chest from the earlier fragmented memories intensified, now a searing pain of recognition. He looked from the photograph to Lily, truly looked at her, seeing for the first time not just the quiet, talented girl who cooked for him, but the striking resemblance, the familiar curve of her smile, the depth in her eyes. Lily's culinary talent, once a means of survival, now became a source of joy and creative expression. Alexander encouraged her, setting up a state-of-the-art test kitchen where she could experiment with new recipes and refine her skills. She began to create dishes that were not only delicious but also imbued with a unique blend of her humble origins and her newfound opportunities. Her food became a symbol of her journey, a testament to her resilience and the unexpected beauty that could emerge from hardship. The room seemed to spin. The air grew thick with unspoken questions. Alexander Thorne, the man who had meticulously controlled every aspect of his life, was suddenly confronted with a forgotten chapter, a profound secret, and a truth that promised to unravel everything he thought he knew. The photograph, seemingly innocent, had just opened a Pandora's box he never knew existed. The old photograph, a silent harbinger of forgotten truths, had shattered Alexander's carefully constructed world. The image of Clara, the woman he had loved and lost, holding a baby he believed to be dead, now burned into his mind. The uncanny resemblance between the infant in the photo and Lily was no longer a mere coincidence. It was a screaming question that demanded an answer. The room still spun, the air thick with the weight of unspoken possibilities. The Thorne mansion, once a cold, silent monument to Alexander's solitary ambition, was transformed into a warm, loving home. Laughter echoed through its halls. The scent of Lily's cooking filled the air, and the presence of a family, once fractured and lost, was now whole. Alexander found true fulfillment not in the boardroom, but in the quiet moments shared with his daughter, watching her grow, learn, and thrive. He had regained his health, his company, and his reputation, but most importantly, he had found his daughter, and in doing so, had found himself. The journey had been arduous, filled with pain and betrayal, but it had led him to the greatest treasure of all, unconditional love and the profound joy of building a family. Years unfurled like a vibrant tapestry, each thread woven with renewed purpose and profound happiness. The Thorne mansion, once a symbol of Alexander's solitary ambition, and later, his silent suffering, had truly transformed into a bustling, joyous home. The echoes of laughter, the comforting aroma of Lily's cooking, and the vibrant energy of a family made whole filled every corner. Alexander, usually a man of immediate action, found himself paralyzed for a long moment, the album still clutched in Lily's trembling hand. He looked at her, truly seeing her, and a wave of protective instinct, primal and overwhelming, washed over him. The quiet, talented girl who had saved his life might be more than just his chef. She might be his daughter. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. Lily, no longer the quiet, wary child from the old quarter, had blossomed into a confident, brilliant young woman. Her culinary talents, nurtured by Alexander's unwavering support and the state-of-the-art kitchen, had not only flourished, but had begun to gain recognition beyond the walls of the mansion. She pursued her education with zeal, excelling in her studies. But her true passion remained in the kitchen. She experimented tirelessly, blending the humble, soulful flavors of her childhood with sophisticated techniques, creating dishes that were both comforting and innovative. Her food became a testament to her journey, a delicious narrative of resilience, discovery, and the unexpected beauty that could emerge from hardship. He gently took the album from Lily, his touch surprisingly tender. "Lily," he said, his voice strained. "This is an old photograph. It's a very old memory. Please, don't worry about it." He knew his words were hollow, but he needed time to process the seismic shift that had just occurred. He couldn't burden her with the weight of his dawning realization. Not yet. Alexander, too, had undergone a profound transformation. The ruthless CEO, once consumed by power and success, now found his greatest fulfillment in his role as a father. He still helmed Thorne Industries, guiding it to new heights with his characteristic brilliance. But his priorities had irrevocably shifted. Board meetings were balanced with school events, late-night analyses replaced by quiet evenings reading with Lily, and the pursuit of profits now shared space with the pursuit of shared joy. He learned to truly live again, finding a depth of happiness he had never known was possible. Lily, sensing the profound shift in his demeanor, simply nodded, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and a nascent fear. She retreated quietly to the kitchen, leaving Alexander alone in the study. The photograph a searing brand on his consciousness, their bond forged in the crucible of his illness, and the shocking revelation of their connection grew stronger with each passing day. They were not just father and daughter, they were confidants, friends, and each other's unwavering support system. Lily often sought Alexander's advice, not just on personal matters, but even on the subtle art of negotiation, a skill she surprisingly found fascinating. Alexander, in turn, found himself consulting Lily on matters of taste, intuition, and the simple truths that often eluded the complex world of business. He spent the rest of the day in a haze, the board meeting a distant, irrelevant hum. His mind replayed the fragmented memories, the scents, the sounds, the fleeting images, now coalescing around Clara's face, around a tiny, swaddled form. The grief he had buried years ago, the pain of losing his unborn child, resurfaced with a vengeance. But this time, it was laced with a furious, burning anger. If Lily was his daughter, then he had been lied to, profoundly and cruelly. Mrs. N, though her health remained delicate, lived out her remaining years in comfort and peace, surrounded by the love of Lily and the respect of Alexander. She had witnessed Lily's incredible journey, from a struggling child to a thriving young woman, and her heart was full. Her passing, when it came, was gentle, leaving behind a legacy of quiet strength and unconditional love that continued to shape Lily's character. That evening, Alexander made a series of discreet calls. He bypassed his usual corporate security and legal teams. Knowing that such a sensitive matter required absolute secrecy, he contacted Elias Vance, a retired private investigator known for his unparalleled discretion and his ability to unearth even the most deeply buried secrets. Vance had worked for Thorne Industries on a few highly sensitive cases in the past, and Alexander trusted him implicitly. The story of Alexander and Lily became an urban legend in Viridian City, whispered in boardrooms and celebrated in local cafes. It was a tale of a powerful man brought to his knees by an unknown affliction, only to be saved by the most unlikely of saviors, his own long-lost daughter. It was a testament to the enduring power of family, the relentless pursuit of justice, and the profound truth that sometimes the greatest treasures are found in the most unexpected places. "Elias," Alexander said, his voice low and urgent, "I need your help. This is deeply personal, and it needs to be handled with the utmost confidentiality. No one, absolutely no one, can know about this." One sunny afternoon, years after their lives had intertwined, Alexander watched Lily as she prepared a new dish in her test kitchen, her movements fluid and confident. He saw the woman Clara could have been, the child he had almost lost, and the remarkable individual she had become. A quiet smile touched his lips. His life, once a desolate landscape of ambition and despair, was now a vibrant garden, cultivated by love, forgiveness, and the extraordinary bond he shared with his daughter. The journey had been arduous, filled with pain and betrayal, but it had led them both to a new beginning, a future brimming with hope, happiness, and the unbreakable ties of family. Vance, a man of few words, simply replied, "Understood, Mr. Thorne. What do you need? Thanks for watching." If you enjoyed this story and want to see more tales of unexpected connections and dramatic twists, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Stay with us for the next one. And while you're here, check out our other videos. There's always more to explore. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. Alexander explained carefully the discovery of the photograph, the unsettling resemblance, the resurfacing memories. He provided Vance with the few details he had about Clara, her family, and the circumstances surrounding their separation and the supposed loss of their child. He emphasized the need to investigate Lily's background, her true parentage, and any connections to his past. "I want you to start with Clara," Alexander instructed, his voice hardening with resolve. "Find out everything about her life after we parted ways, and then I want you to trace Lily's origins. Every detail, every connection. I need to know the truth, Elias, no matter how painful it might be." Vance assured him of his immediate attention. The investigation began the very next day, a silent, meticulous unraveling of a past Alexander had believed was sealed shut. He provided Vance with samples for DNA testing, samples discreetly obtained from Lily's discarded hairbrush and his own. He knew that the DNA results would be the ultimate arbiter of truth, but he needed the full picture, the context, the story behind the potential deception. As Vance began his work, Alexander found himself observing Lily with a new intensity. He saw the way she cared for her grandmother, the quiet strength in her eyes, the innate kindness that shone through her every action. These were qualities he admired, qualities he now desperately hoped were inherited, a confirmation of the bond he increasingly felt. The days that followed were a torment of anticipation. Alexander maintained his usual stoic facade at work, but beneath it, a storm raged. He ate Lily's food, each bite a reminder of the girl who might be his daughter, a girl whose very existence was a testament to a profound betrayal. He knew that the truth, when it finally emerged, would either bring him the greatest joy or the deepest sorrow, but he was ready. He had to be. The Pandora's box was open, and he was determined to face whatever secrets lay within. Elias Vance was a man who moved through the shadows, a ghost in the vast machinery of Viridian City. His investigation into Alexander's past was a meticulous, painstaking process, peeling back layers of time and deception. He started with Clara, tracing her life after the abrupt end of her engagement to Alexander, a period Alexander himself had deliberately erased from his memory, too painful to revisit. Vance's initial findings were unsettling. Clara, Alexander had been told, had left the country shortly after their breakup, seeking solace abroad. The official story was that she had suffered a deep depression, exacerbated by the loss of their child, and had chosen to disappear from public life. But Vance discovered a different narrative. Clara had indeed left Viridian City, but not for long. She had resurfaced in a quiet, affluent suburb on the outskirts of the city, living a life of comfortable anonymity, far from the public eye. Alexander received Vance's initial report with a growing sense of dread. He instructed Vance to dig deeper, to find out everything about Clara's life, her associates, and most importantly, any connection to Lily. The detective's next discovery sent a cold shiver down Alexander's spine. Clara had maintained a surprisingly close relationship with Marcus Thorne, Alexander's own brother, throughout the years. Their connection, initially dismissed as a lingering friendship, now seemed far more sinister. Armed with this information and a burning desire for answers, Alexander decided to confront Clara himself. He arranged a meeting through Vance, ensuring it would be in a neutral, public location, a quiet cafe in a discreet part of the city. He wanted to see her face, to look into her eyes, and to search for the truth he instinctively knew she was hiding. The meeting was tense. Clara, older now, but still possessing a striking beauty, entered the cafe with a practiced elegance. Her eyes, however, held a flicker of apprehension when she saw Alexander waiting. She feigned surprise, a polite smile plastered on her face. "Alexander, what a surprise! It's been so long." The silence of the penthouse was a heavy cloak, suffocating Alexander Thorne more than the crisp, sterile air. Outside, the sprawling metropolis of Viridian City pulsed with life, a vibrant tapestry of ambition and commerce. Inside, Alexander, the brilliant architect of Thorne Industries, felt only the slow, relentless drain of his own. Alexander cut straight to the chase, his voice devoid of his usual corporate suavity, replaced by a raw, controlled anger. "Clara, we need to talk about the past. About our child." For months, a mysterious, debilitating condition had held him captive. Food, once a simple pleasure, had become a potent enemy. Every bite, every morsel, was a gamble, often ending in violent allergic reactions that left him writhing in pain, his body racked with tremors and his breath catching in his throat. His once formidable physique had wasted away, leaving him gaunt, his sharp features etched with a permanent shadow of exhaustion. Clara's composure faltered. Her eyes darted around the cafe, searching for an escape. "I don't know what you're talking about, Alexander. That was a long time ago. A painful time." His vast wealth, enough to command the finest medical minds across the globe, had proven utterly useless. Specialists, renowned for their groundbreaking research and miraculous cures, had come and gone, their faces a mix of frustration and pity. They had run every conceivable test, offered every experimental treatment, but the results were always the same: a shrug, a sympathetic glance, and the admission that they were at a loss. Alexander Thorne, the man who could bend markets to his will and reshape industries with a single decision, was powerless against his own failing body. "Don't play games with me, Clara," Alexander growled, pushing the old photograph across the table. It was a copy Vance had made, enlarged and clear. "This photograph and Lily. Explain it to me."